Hello and welcome to IGPP Expert Talks. Today we are discussing an important issue, to ban or not to ban. The social media has become something which is such a debatable thing these days among parents, among children, among policymakers. Children and teenagers today are growing up in a world where being online is not a choice but a given. Platforms designed for connection and communication have also become spaces where young people are exposed to harmful content and serious mental health pressures. Governments around the world are grappling with this difficult question. How do we protect children online without cutting them off from the opportunities the digital world offers? Over the last many months, countries like Australia, UK, Malaysia, Indonesia, and now UAE have moved towards restricting or outrightly banning children's access to social media. In India, too, several states are actively debating on the same. To help us think through these questions carefully and practically, we are joined today by someone who has worked both inside the industry and in academia to find better answer. Ravi Iyer. Ravi Iyer, Managing Director of the University of Southern California's Marshall Neely Center and a social psychologist who has worked on the social impacts of technology and social media. And in his earlier stint at Meta, he led data science research and product teams and worked on issues ranging from algorithms and comment tracking to bullying and harassment on social media. Thank you so much once again, Raviji. I would like to begin with you that, before we discuss the ban and regulation, how do you assess the current state of child online safety? Are we really witnessing an anxious generation, and what concerns should be at the center of this conversation?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, and thank you for this important conversation. Yes, I think that there's an urgent need, and the reason why you cited the many governments around the world that are taking action, and the reason they're taking action is because it is something that parents in every community sees, right? Parents in every community see kids who, they're having a meal together, and instead of talking to each other, they're on their phones, or instead of sleeping at night, they're in the room on their phones. And I often will start talks by asking adults, how many of you spend too much time on your phones and want to spend less? And we all raise our hands. Kids say the same thing. Kids often realize that there's something wrong, that they're using their phones too much. There's a study in the United States, 70% of kids feel manipulated by these products. And it has all sorts of effects, right? So kids themselves will say that they use it too much. 45% of kids in the US will say it affects their sleep. 40% say it affects their productivity. So there's that overusage. There's a lot of exposure to unwanted content. So, I actually think kids should be able to go find and read whatever they want. But a lot of kids are saying that they're seeing things that they're not ready for. In the United States, the average age of pornography exposure is age 12. A lot of those kids are saying they see it not because they want to, but they're seeing it accidentally. An algorithm is pushing content that they don't want to see, especially at a younger age, right? So they're having these unwanted experiences, and a lot of kids are also getting contacted by strangers in inappropriate ways, in some cases leading to tragedies. So there's a lot of harms that are happening to these platforms. There are these more broad harms like using things too much, comparing yourself to celebrities and feeling bad about your life. Like, these are sort of widespread harms. Reduced attention spans, and then these acute harms as well. And I think parents around the world are seeing it, and that's why you're seeing action being taken.
I agree with what you are saying because, I just read your interview with the Indian Express where you are referring these, what we are calling bans as age limit, and you are not calling them bans. And this was just last week. Do you think it is an effective child protection measure, or are they kind of, largely a right policy response for the concerns, or does it require something new?
So I think there's a perfect is the enemy of the good situation here. So I think I 100% support age limits. I call it an age limit because, in Australia, kids can still go onto YouTube and search for content. They can send a friend their favorite TikTok video. Things can still spread the way they used to. What they can't do is post a picture of themselves and see how many strangers like it, or they can't, get notifications at 1 a.m, right? So a lot of the manipulative aspects of these platforms are reduced, at least. with these age limit policies. Now, is it a silver bullet that's going to solve everything all at once? Probably not. Like nothing is going to solve. It took us a decade to get into this situation. It's going to take more than this to get out of it. But it's a great first step, right? We've already seen in Australia, roughly 30% of a drop in usage of many of these platforms. That's in a few short months. Platforms are not willfully complying. They open an investigation into platforms that are not complying with the law, and so it's going to take time. But we've seen promising first steps, and I think this is a great first step for many countries to do. I think you also want to pass design legislation. I think you also want to address things like chatbots. You're seeing other jurisdictions, not just address social media, but like Canada, for example, is addressing social media and chatbots. Indonesia is addressing social media and gaming platforms that also are trying to get you to use them as much as possible. So I think it's a great first step, and I'm excited to see India and many states in India take this step.
I think what you are mentioning about Canada is definitely one welcome step, that they are moving a little ahead. Only again, just more than platforms, they are also coming to chatbots and all. My question is, for years, governments have relied on platforms to self-regulate and protect young users. Based on your experience working with the technology companies, how effective has this approach been? And where do you see its biggest limitations?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it hasn't been that effective so far. And you have to take a long view. So cars were built in the 1900s, and we actually didn't get seatbelts until like the 60s, at least in the United States. So it took a while. And it takes a while to understand the physics of these platforms and what you want to regulate. And so we're developing that knowledge, and I think we have a good handle. If you read some of the court cases in the United States, some of the age-appropriate design code laws, we have a sense of like what makes a harmful platform, and I think that can form the basis of the platforms that you age limit. So platforms are, I don't think they're evil, but they're not going to be objective judges of their own products, right? Like nobody's an objective judge. It's like asking a parent to judge their own child, right? Like they're not going to be objective judges, and they need society to help them, design, just like we have building standards. We don't let builders decide, what is your standard for a safe building, right? We come up with an objective standard so that we don't leave it to every builder to decide for themselves, like how to build a building. Well, we shouldn't leave it up to every social media platform to decide how, what is safe or what is not. And so I think it's perfectly appropriate that we in society need to take a stronger stand.
You have also advocated for design-based solutions to enhance child online safety. Do you think that safety by design can provide a more sustainable alternative to outright bans? And if yes, what would be meaningful implementation look like in practice?
So I actually think age limits and design legislation go hand in hand, and one should pass both, and they're actually very complementary. So I refer you to Indonesia's age limit law, which says effectively, if you have these harmful design features, then you are age limited, right? And it's very similar to age appropriate design code laws, but it puts the presumption on the companies to prove that they're safe, as opposed to saying that companies need to reform their existing practices. And in practice, that presumption that you are unsafe and the burden of proof on the companies has had a much bigger effect on companies. I was reading an article earlier today about Snapchat is like moving very quickly to reform their platform because these age limit laws are becoming so popular, right? So they understand it's existential to them, and they need to really, and it's existential in a way that the age appropriate design code stuff has not been, right? So it's equivalent. And so I think design legislation and age limits, they work hand in hand, but the approach of saying, you guys are unsafe, prove to us you're safe. Canada's age limit law has that aspect too. It's just a much more effective way to get platforms to take action than the other approach where we've been sort of saying like, well, here are some design features. Could you please regulate? Could you please change your practices? And companies are just not moving fast enough with that paradigm.
Another point, like many scholars have argued that today's attention economy, it rewards platforms for maximizing engagement, often at the expense of users' well-being. It's a phenomena which we are sometimes describing as race to the bottom of the brainstem. In your view, what choices are necessary to reverse this trend and create a safer, healthier digital ecosystem for children and also for adolescents?
Yeah, so say a couple things. One, there's the set of design features that we know are, part of that race to the bottom of the brainstem, the attention maximizing economy, and we should just make sure we prohibit those, and sort of age limit any platform that has that combination of features, right? The second thing is, I think we need to start monitoring these outcomes. So, one reason I feel confident in this is, we do studies, people do studies around the world, understanding what percentage of kids say that they are using these things too much. What percentage of kids say it's affecting their sleep? Consistent finding is that like TikTok is a platform where like it's really affecting kids' sleep, right? Kids, a significant number of kids say that. And so just understanding like what are the specific platforms and the features of these platforms and monitoring that so that if a product manager comes up with a new feature that grabs attention that we didn't think of already, we have some measurement to understand that. And the last thing I'd say is, interoperability, thinking about ways that, a lot of kids use these platforms not because they love the platform, but because all their friends are on the platform, or maybe their favorite sports stars on the platform. And it's sort of a natural monopoly. So if you create interoperability some way so that people can take the information on the platform and use it in different ways, then maybe there'd be room for other platforms that are not designed to maximize attention to experiment more. So I think both reform the design features, monitoring systems, and then creating interoperability so there's a market for non-attention maximizing platforms. I think all three of those can work in concert to change the system we have.
I think this is something you have also spoken to Indian Express about. Like this is a big dilemma for parents, particularly whether you allow your children or not. Because if you allow them, then you don't know what's happening, and if you don't allow them, then it becomes difficult because it is not in their own control. And this is a very anxious moment for parents. Like my kid shouldn't be left behind, or where it would go. So if we talk about a country like India, sir, several states have also started talking about it, like what should be done, what not should. Some of the, like a state like Karnataka are preparing their drafts and all. What do you think, particularly a country like India could think of kind of, India-specific guidelines for policymakers in a way?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the original sins of Silicon Valley is that idea that the more you use a product, the more value you're getting out of it. And so I just encourage the people in India to think about what is the value you want kids to be getting from the product, right? Maybe you want them to be learning new things, right? And so you can use YouTube perfectly well to learn a new language or learn about science and math without an account, right? So that's where, an age limit policy can separate some of the harms, the things like the notification late at night, kids posting images of themselves and seeing what people think. Like you can limit those things without getting rid of the things that you think are truly valuable. In the chatbot use case, a lot of what people want from chatbots is like help with productivity. They want, time savings. They want like to learn things from them. A lot of the laws around chatbots really focus on like the sycophantic behavior, like the thing where it's like trying to, you ask it like, I had a fight with my parents. What do you think? And like the chatbot's like, well, your parents are probably wrong. You should keep talking to me instead, right? Like that kind of thing is not what we want from our chatbots. We want chatbots to be teaching kids, not like, helping them adjudicate relationships with their parents. And these are the kinds of things. So drawing these lines between, the information productivity seeking cases, which I think are at the core of what many societies want. Maybe that's also the core of what people in India want from these products for their kids. And then these sort of more harmful use cases. And how do we separate those two so that kids can have the power of the internet, but maybe they're not being manipulated by these companies, which just want you to use these products as much as possible. And they do all sorts of things that maybe are not in the interest of our kids in order to have that happen.
I think that's one interesting thing, but one of the major issues with a country like India is that, it lives in many layers. We have a lot of stages of development where I think we have seen in our experiences, a lot of parents are just proud, oh, my kid can use a phone. Now, in such a situation, what kind of societal norms you think kind of, could be incorporated into education system or our value system then?
Yeah, I mean, especially kids who maybe are lower in terms of experience with products, they're the most vulnerable to attention maximizing designs. And so I think you want to give, kids access to technology and learn about technology, but they just, I think you want to protect them at the same time and not have platforms, signing them up for accounts where they're sort of harvesting their data and trying to get them to use things as much as possible. Where they're not. I mean, you still, even as you want kids to learn about technology, you don't want them to stop talking to people in the world, right? You don't want them to stop sleeping at night, right? Like you still have other things you want them to do. And increasingly, I don't know the stats in India, but like in many societies, we're seeing this crowding out where, there's many kids who say that they're on these things almost constantly. They're spending, 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours on these things every day. And when you do that, you're at school, 8 hours a day, you have to study somehow, you have to eat, how much hours are left to do anything else? So I think there's a balance to be had, right? Like you want to have access to these technologies, but you don't want kids, especially kids who are, maybe vulnerable. They don't understand, like they're being manipulated as well. And they don't have the self-control to exercise the willpower needed to stop. They're just being shown video after video that sort of grabs their attention. We don't want companies taking advantage of that. And so I do think that, there are ways that you can give people access to technology. Age limits are not about restricting the internet. We're not even restricting YouTube, right? Like we're saying you just can't have an account, right? And so therefore, there's a lot of harms and a lot of things that come with having an account that we think you can mitigate. And there's certainly more work to be done. But I think it's a great start for how you start giving kids a little bit more agency in terms of their relationship with technology.
You have been, I would say, on side of the research, on side of implementation for the companies even. In present case scenario, I would say one or two policy recommendations is I would ask you, which could reach the government of India or people who are working on it, what it could be.
Yeah, I mean, I think age limits tied to design features is great. So I'd look at the law in Indonesia, look at how it says, if you have certain design features, then you may not serve kids, right? I think that sort of presumptive, you are harmful and prove that you're safe paradigm is great. I would extend that to chatbots like Canada does, and I would extend it to video games like Indonesia does as well. And then, I think you also want design reforms that affect the wider population. These things, again, don't exist in tension in places where they've passed age limits. You've also seen people be concerned about the elderly, right? Like, so, a lot of kids are being contacted by strangers and they can't tell like that's what's going on. They're impersonating maybe someone with a romantic interest in them. There's a lot of elderly people who I think also are falling prey to some of these scams and traps, and we need to protect them as well, right? So once you establish that these design features are harmful, I think you need to start thinking about what other groups you want to protect. And I think that we're seeing that happen where, these age limits are sort of opening the door to being like, well, who else do we need to protect in our communities? And then, I'd also then lastly talk about interoperability as a solution. I think there's some largely American companies, Chinese companies that are sort of dominating the market. And it's because they sort of have a monopoly on if you want to see what your favorite sports team or celebrity is doing, you have to go there. And, that's unfortunate because, maybe people in India have better ideas about how to serve the population. And so, interoperability, data portability, things that open the market so that local products maybe can serve consumers better. I would explore those kinds of policies so that you're not at the whims of these other players.
But I also believe that, what you have told just now about the companies and about the Indian companies or local companies and the dominance of maybe US or Chinese companies, what is kind of network effect, which you talk about children, I think that is something we also have to learn as an industry, as a country. And the debate to ban or not to ban, I think what you are saying, what you have been termed as or referred it as age limit. So to ban or not to ban is not a question, but definitely to put age limits is a recommendations we definitely make.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, appreciate your attention to the issue, and 100%. I think would love to support India in its exploration of age limits and how it can protect the millions, hundreds of millions of kids in the country.
Thank you so much, Ravi Iyer ji, and that's it for this show. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.